Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Chill coming back again with another tier list video. It's been a while since I did one of these, and I know it's kind of been a while since I've uploaded. The upload schedule has kind of slowed down a little bit, but there's good reason for that. I've been working behind the scenes on some things that I think are going to be pretty cool, some updates, some upgrades to the channel, to just the Chill Review brand, I guess. I am working on some bigger form videos as well, and I think you guys are going to be pretty excited to find out, what I've been planning and holding back this whole time. So, but yeah, so this video though is just gonna keep up with the Avatar stuff. I've been on a big Avatar kick recently. Really making the first video about book 2 of The Last Airbender really got me back into the show. So obviously I made the Korra video after that. And now I just want to go back to the OG series and just talk about every episode, from the OG series, and just rank them from, what I think are the better ones, what I think are the okay ones, and what I think are the, there's not many, but the ones that I think aren't so great. Avatar, obviously, one of the best shows of all time. So it's no secret that I really like it, that I don't think that there's too many bad episodes. There's too much negative to talk about this show. I don't really like talking about negatives anyway. I like praising things, I speak about what speaks to me, is the motto I live by in this channel. But yeah, so we got all the episodes from book 1, 2, and 3, and I apologize if you hear some things outside, like maybe like cars going by or some people, whatever, but I'm in a different setup right now. Had to do this on the move. So yeah, it's gonna be a little different, but yeah, you'll be fine. I'll edit some stuff out. You'll be good. So let's get into the tiers. I've broken it down into 5 tiers. There's not too many. I don't feel the need for much more than that. I don't think Avatar is one of those shows where it's so good that you don't really need, there aren't too many bad episodes, right? So you don't need too many tiers for the trash episodes or the more average episodes, because honestly, most of these are pretty good. But at the bottom, we got straight cabbage, which, a joke about the show. But yeah, that's the worst of the worst episodes, which, like I said, probably won't be too many that get put in there. We got mid, just for the episodes that are just kind of average, right? Nothing too special about them. Solid is where I would say where the good episodes are going to be put. Episodes that aren't like, all too important to the series or all that memorable, but are definitely still good episodes that help the momentum of the series in each season keep going, positively. And then you got fire, which is, I feel like the most apt element to describe like the great episodes. These are the episodes that are, really memorable, really great, but maybe just 1 or 2 things missing to stop them from being like top tier. And then at the top, we have the series defining episodes. These are the best of the best of the best, whatever that dude from Men in Black said. Yeah, these are the GOATs. These are the episodes that completely changed the series, really made an impact on me as a kid watching this, and even as an adult rewatching the episodes. They still, they still hit all the right spots, So let's go ahead and start with the first episode, which is the first episode, The Boy in the Iceberg. And I don't know how you guys feel about, because Avatar has a lot of like part 1, part 2 episodes, but The Boy in the Iceberg and The Avatar Returns are sort of like a package deal. They're like this, they're basically the first episode combined. And I remember back in the day when the show first premiered, Nickelodeon would play this over and over and over again, like that 60-hour block of just The Boy in the Iceberg, The Avatar Returns, like those 2 episodes together forever. So they're just, in my mind, connected. I think it's a really good introduction to the series, and I would put it in fire, in the great fire tier, but I think it's one of those things where like it was really good at the time, but in with the full context and retrospect of the series, in its totality, to see how far the show comes and how much better it gets from this point, I think the best that I can do is put it in solid. Like, it is a solid introduction to what ends up being an all-time great show, is the best way that I think I can describe it. But yeah, so That's where I put those episodes. And then after that, we have the first of the Air Temple episodes, the Southern Air Temple. And this, I think I'm also going to put in solid. I think this episode is one of the best and most iconic and memorable moments of the show, where, you know, Aang finally finds Monkey Yatso, but unfortunately for Aang, that dude is a corpse now. And, you know, he has that breakdown where he goes to the Avatar state for the first time. Well, first time, you know, in the present time. And you know, Katara has to calm him down and hug him and let him know that it's okay and everything like that. Like, that's a great memorable moment. But other than that, this whole episode is just kind of the gang fumbling around the Air Temple, Sokka trying to track down Momo and eat Momo, which kind of dark if you think about it, considering Momo becomes their pet later. But whatever, ignore that. But yeah, the episode's just all right, I think, outside of that ending moment. But that ending moment is really, really good, really memorable. And then the next episode, I think, is the first one that we're going to put in the fire tier, and that's the Kyoshi Warriors, or the Warriors of Kyoshi. I think this is one of the more memorable episodes of the series. It's one of the more impactful episodes just over the rest of the series, right? Like, this is the episode that introduces the Kyoshi Warriors with Tsuchie and Sokka and their relationship. It introduces probably the most talked about and mentioned Avatar outside of Roku in Avatar Kyoshi. I feel like they're even now like planning to make a Kyoshi show. That's how long like the legacy of Kyoshi has lasted. And yeah, it's just a solid episode all around. And it's the first episode where I feel like you really see the impact of what like the Avatar means to the world of Avatar, right? It's the first time where the kids are actually like in a society that's not Sokka and Katara's home or Aang's temple where everybody's dead. So definitely a fire episode. And then we have the King of Omashu, which 100% is going in fire. King Bumi is the motherfucking man. I've never met somebody who didn't fuck with King Bumi heavy. So anything with King Bumi is probably going to go into fire tier, at least. But yeah, this is a really good episode, and a really good introduction to earthbending in the show, because I believe this is the first time we see earthbending, and I think we had seen all the other forms before this, like obviously air, water, fire, with Zuko and everything like that. So yeah, it was cool introduction to finally see the last element that to yet to be revealed. And then we have Imprisoned. And Imprisoned is probably one of my favorite episodes of book one. Katara is kind of an interesting character in the show, because I feel like when she isn't in the spotlight, you know, when the episode isn't about her, a lot of times it's easy for her to just kind of like fade into the background and just be like a generic sort of like, oh, we have to love each other and support each other type of character. But it's episodes like this that show that she really does have a lot of, determination, a lot of she's able to inspire people. She's very charismatic. There's a lot to her character more than just like the generic love interest, helpful, motherly type character, right? And this episode of her like inspiring Haru and Haru's father to, you know, fight back and be like the proud earthbenders that deep down she knows they are. It was just a cool episode. I don't know if I'd put it as series defining, but it's definitely one of the like I said, one of my favorite episodes of book one. Then we have the Spirit World, which I think I'm gonna put in solid. It was cool to see like the introduction of the Spirit World and like the winter solstice and stuff like that. But overall, I think the episode's kind of forgettable. It's not much of importance happens. And the same thing with Avatar Roku. I'm also going to put in solid. It was cool to see, right, like Roku and Aang have that conversation through like spiritually, and there was some cool moments in this episode. But I connect these two together, and I feel like they're kind of they're all right. You know, they're solid episodes, but nothing more than that. The Waterbending Scroll is an episode I actually really like. I'm going to put it in fire. It was the first episode, I think, where we have like some sort of like jealousy and contention with Aang and Katara. Like, you see just how good of a bender Aang really is, that he's picking up waterbending. just as fast, if not faster, than Katara. And the pirates and the dynamic between like them and Zuko and the team and the Team Avatar, and they're all like kind of going with each other but against each other. I don't know, it's a cool little episode that kind of, again, it doesn't mean much in the context of the whole series, but it's a cool little like side story episode. But yeah, so now with Jet, I think we have our first, what I would call, series defining episode. I fucking love this episode. I think it's probably, with maybe one exception, probably the best episode in season 1, book 1, season 1. And I mentioned this in my video about book 2 of Avatar, where Jet comes back in the Ba Sing Se arc. But Jet is one of my favorite characters, and he's one of my favorite character archetypes, because the Avatar show has a lot of different types of characters, but a lot of them fall into the same archetype of, oh, they're a good guy who does good things, or they're a bad guy who does bad things, or they're a bad guy who wants to be good, or a good guy who maybe wants to be bad. I don't know, maybe that one not as much. But Jet is one of the only people who falls into the category of good guy or bad guy who's bad only because he's trying to do good too much. Like he's going too far on the side of good to the point where it makes him a bad guy. And that type of character, that character archetype, is one of my favorites, just in fiction in general. So to see it all, his character arc play out in this episode, is really cool. A lot of memorable moments. Also, I was a huge Mortal Kombat fan as a little kid, and Cabal was one of my favorite characters, and he had hook swords. So to see hook swords come back, in my life at least, with Jet was really dope. So definitely what I'd say was the first series defining episode of the show. And from there we go to an episode, The Great Divide, which is kind of funny about this episode is that a lot of people, myself included, seem to have like this shared experience of whenever back in the day we would be watching Avatar: The Last Airbender on Nickelodeon, it always felt like this episode was on, right? Like, I don't know what the airing schedule was like for Nickelodeon, but it's like once this episode first aired, it was just like they just went back to it at least once a day. And again, every time I turned the TV on and turned to Nickelodeon, it just felt like this was the episode of Avatar that I had to watch. It's one of those episodes that feels very inconsequential to the overall plot. Like, it kind of just is like a side filler episode. Like, the only thing that happens is they cross the Great Divide, right? Which they didn't even need an episode for. But the actual like characters and everything, and the interactions and everything that happens in the story is completely unnecessary. It's kind of funny though, but I don't know. I'm gonna put it. This is gonna be the first episode that I put in mid, right? It's not straight garbage, like it's not straight just terrible episode, but it's definitely one of the weaker episodes in the series. And like I said, it just got played over and over and over again for whatever reason. And then The Storm is definitely fire. It's probably, The Storm is a really good episode because it's the first one that I think really focuses on Prince Zuko and his past and partly why he is the way he is. There's an even better episode that does that as well in book 2 that we'll get to obviously later in the video, but I think this episode's really good, focusing on the bad guys. And this was just, again, them planting those seeds of Zuko eventually becoming one of the good guys. And my dumbass, 10-year-old brain back in the day could not put that together until like book 3. But yeah, no, definitely a great episode. Probably the top of fire tier, at least so far. And then we have the Blue Spirit, which I'm also going to put in fire. This episode was really good in general, but I think the most memorable moment from this episode is the conversation that Aang has with Zuko after they basically save each other's lives. When Zuko tries to break Aang out of Commander Zhao or Admiral Zhao, I can't remember which version he was at this point in the series, and it's just Zuko lying down, just waking up in the forest with Aang, like, sitting down next to him, and Aang's giving him like the whole story of his friend from the Fire Nation 100 years ago, and Aang basically asking like, yeah, if you think if things were different, that we could be friends, and then Zuko just immediately just attacking him, and Aang running away. But yeah, no, and again, just another seed planted about Zuko eventually turning to the side of good and joining Aang and helping him take down his father. But yeah, really good episode. And then we have another very much filler side episode in The Fortune Teller. This one I definitely think belongs in mid, even more so than The Great Divide. It's very forgettable and inconsequential, even more inconsequential to the overall plot, because literally nothing of importance directly to the story happens other than Katara potentially realizing that Aang, it might be the man that she should fall in love with. But I mean, that happens in other episodes too, so it's not really that important. Also kind of interesting that the little girl who's, you know, in the love triangle with Aang, Katara, and her, I forget her name, but with the weird hair, that it's Toph's voice actress, so technically the introduction of Toph, but you know, not really. But yeah, it definitely belongs in mid. And then there's Bato, the Water Tribe. I'm gonna put this episode in solid. I think it's kind of like a precursor to the episode where Sokka finally rejoins or reunites with his dad, Hakoto, I think it's his name. And it's all right. Like, it's a cool episode, but it's not, I don't think it's anything too special. And then we have The Deserter, which I would say is probably, no pun intended, I would say The Deserter is probably fire. Just the idea of seeing Aang firebend so early was pretty cool. But seeing, you know, the dangers, Aang learned the dangers of firebending, and then this causing him to have sort of like PTSD and not wanting to firebend all the way into the future in book 3. Like the ramifications that this episode has on the whole series and Aang's mental state about, you know, learning firebending and accepting his role as the Avatar to learn all 4 elements is really cool. So just for that alone, I think it deserves to be put up all the way up in fire tier. And then we have the next episode of the Air Temple episodes, the Northern Air Temple. I'm gonna put this episode in fire. I don't know how other people feel about this episode, but I think it's one of those episodes where, again, not too consequential and impactful over the course of the series. The only thing is that, this is, I guess, the start of where you learn where the Fire Nation starts to learn or get their schematics for their tank designs and their drill designs and stuff like that. But it is definitely a really good story. I like when they tell stories about characters who appear to be one way, end up actually being another way, like being not as good of a person as you think they are, but then also they bring it back around to have that person show some redemption, right? And I think this was like a prime example of that. So yeah, I put it in fire tier. It's definitely one of the more like well-told stories, like isolated stories of the show. And then we have the Waterbending Master, which I'm 100% putting in fire tier. Not quite series defining, and I don't know if I've made it clear exactly what the series defining tier means, but it has to be an episode that changed the way that I viewed the show, or is 100% integral. Like, it's an episode that if you were describing the show to somebody, you would have to watch this episode. That's what I consider. It has to be quality level, impact level, and then for me, if it made me feel like really emotionally connected to it. But the Waterbending Master is definitely like right on the cusp of that. Just, you know, Pak Moon, the biggest dickhead bender in the show, probably just a huge sexist. Aang trying to, you know, find his place among the, and I always forget if it's the North Pole or the South Pole that is the nicer one, or the one where Katara and Sokka are from. I think Katara and Sokka are from the South Pole, and the nice bougie waterbending place is the North Pole. I could be wrong about that. I could have it flipped, but whatever. Either way, it's a good episode. Sokka and Yue's relationship, you know, that whole starts here where Sokka's just cheating on Tsuchie for a whole arc, and nobody seems to mind to bring it up, which is cool, you know. And then yeah, this episode's fire, and it also leads into the Seeds of the North part 1 and 2, which I would say are both series defining episodes. I'm just going to count all the part 1, part 2, part 3, whatever, broken down episodes as one episode. So the Seeds of the North is 100% a series defining episode. It's one of the best finales I think I've ever seen of a show, of a season of television. I mean, there's just so much that happens in this. The moment of Commander Zhao or General Zhao or Admiral Zhao, whatever the fuck his name is, his title is at this point. The moment where his pride just makes him refuse to accept Zuko's hand to save him. He can't lower himself to allow himself to be saved in that moment is one of my favorite moments in the whole show. Just a perfect way to send off his character. Princess Yue sacrificing herself for the moon spirit was incredible. Aang morphing into the giant like spirit water monster in the Avatar state to like take out the Fire Nation's army. The black soot falling, it's just so many. Zuko's taking Aang and then not having a plan and almost freezing to death in the Arctic. So many great moments in this finale, and just perfectly wraps up book one in such a great way. So yeah, definitely has to go in series defining tier. And then we have the Avatar state, which I've always considered to be a huge kind of like letdown, whereas like I said, book one ended with such a high note, and then this episode is just kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like a leftover from book one that should have been put in the series earlier. I get that it chronologically couldn't based on what the plot is, but I don't know, it just felt like a meh episode, so I'm just gonna put it in mid. But Cave of Two Lovers is an episode that I love. I'm gonna put it in fire tier. I end up singing the amount of times throughout just any day, I'll end up like humming some of the music that the hippie dudes were singing in this song. But also just a cool episode to see Aang and Katara's relationship kind of take a little bit of a next step. Yeah, it's just, and Sokka dealing with the hippies is always funny to watch. But yeah, I definitely put it in fire tier. It's a great episode. And then we have Return to Omashu, which, like I said before, anything with Bumi is definitely going in the fire tier. And it's also, it's not the introduction to Azula. I think that is the Avatar State episode, if I'm correct. But this is the first time we see Azula interact with Team Avatar. And I mentioned it in my book 2 video, but Azula is legitimately, she's the best villain in the show, but she might also be like just the best villain in fiction to me. And anything with her being her villainous, bitchy, twisted self is fire. You know what I mean? Like Azula is that bitch, man. I with her heavy. So yeah, definitely fire for that episode. And The Swamp is another episode where I would put in the fire. And this is something that I really love just in general, but I love when Avatar does this, when they have some character sole purpose in that episode or in the show is to just give these introspective and existential speeches about life and how we're all connected through spirits and energy and shit like that. And I guess the leader of the bumpkin waterbenders at the end, who controls the vines, and his speech about just like time is an illusion and so is death. Like I love that speech he gives at the end. And also just watching like Aang, Katara, Sokka deal with their trauma and their visions in the forest is really dope, or the swamp, I guess, is really cool to see. Which is really interesting, right? Really, really entertaining. And then the introduction technically of Toph, and just showing where the show was going and everything like that. So yeah, I definitely put this episode in the fire tier. But we go from that to what I would say pretty easily is the worst episode of the show, and that's Avatar Day. And this is going to be the first one, and maybe the only one that we put in straight cabbage. This episode sucks. And it sucks even more because everything I just said about the swamp and how it was like moving the show forward and showing you where the direction of the show was going and leading into Toph. And then instead of getting Toph next, we get this episode, which again, completely inconsequential to the plot of the show. It brings Kyoshi back for a little bit, explains more about her lore, but other than that, there's really nothing else of importance that happens in this episode, at least for the Team Avatar side of things. And yeah, it's just a stupid, pointless waste of an episode that comes after 2 or 3 really good episodes and stands in between 2 or 3 more really good episodes. So yeah, it's easily the worst episode and belongs in straight cabbage. But then we get to the Blind Bandit, and the Blind Bandit I think I'm gonna put in series defining. Toph, I said this about Azula, is like one of the best characters in fiction. Toph, I wouldn't say she saves the show, because the show was not in danger of being, forgotten or going downhill, but she raises the quality and the level of the show to another level. She makes it go from a pretty good show that, everyone was enjoying to, again, one of the best shows ever made. Like, yeah, I don't think we can understate just how important Toph's character is to the overall series. And the Blind Bandit is a perfect introduction to her as a character. Like, everything with her and the boulder and like that, and, the gang convincing her to join, even though that means her leaving her, pampered life secretly. Yeah, just fire across the board. And we go from, well, not just fire, series defining across the board. And we go from one series defining episode to another series defining episode in Zuko Alone. I mentioned when I was talking about The Storm that there was another episode that delved into Zuko's past that was even better. And this is it. This episode's amazing, man. The show had no business making an episode this good for a fucking kid's show. Everything about this episode was Zuko questioning his past, his present, his future, doing all these selfless deeds for this family, risking his life for them, and then finally, when pushed to his limits, he proudly exclaims, who he is, and all he gets is rejection and hatred from the same people that he was protecting when he was anonymous, right? Like that is just incredible. And then it starts the way it ends, or it ends the way it starts, with him alone, walking a path that he's not sure where it's going to lead him to. Yeah, just an incredibly well written short story in the the context of the entire show. And then there's the chase, which I would put in fire tier. Just an episode that shows Azula's determination and wickedness really well. I love the showdown with them. It's like Azula, Team Avatar, Zuko, Iroh, all in like the western town. Yeah, really good episode. And Bitter Work, same thing. It's just highlights Toph and everything that makes her a great character, and how her and Aang clash, and Aang's inability to learn earthbending as it's the opposite of air, and all of that. Really good episode. And of course, in that episode, Sokka's just f***ing around as he usually does. Yeah, really like that episode. The library, the desert, and the Serpent's Pass, and the drill. I remember this all being like combined into one like special 2-hour event or something like that back in the day when it aired on Nickelodeon. I'm just gonna put all of them in fire, even though they all are very different episodes. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put Serpent's Pass in solid. Serpent's Pass is the only one of those episodes that I think kind of doesn't match in the quality of the other ones. Like the library, we get to see we get to see Sokka be a piece of shit. I don't hate Sokka in general, but I definitely hate Sokka in that episode, because Washi Tong, whatever his name is, the little owl penguin spirit monster thing, like he's just chilling with his boundless knowledge about the human world, and all he asks is that if a human happens to find it, they read and leave, right? Like that's all he wants. Like don't take my shit, and don't try to use this for your advantage. And what does Sokka do? He takes his shit and tries to use it for his advantage. And then the desert is it's not that I like seeing Aang in pain and anguish and emotional turmoil, but I kind of do like seeing it, only because I think it's captivating television to watch such a funny, fun-loving, goofy kid go through so much emotional torture and pain. So like Aang losing Appa, like we've already seen him when he realizes that he's lost Monkey Atso. We've seen him when he thought he lost Sokka and Katara, and now we see him when he loses Appa. Yeah, and it's just really crazy to watch. Like I said, such a happy, fun-loving kid be so cranky and emotionally distressed. And then the drill, I think, is a cool episode. I've put this one in fire pretty much strictly off of the fight scene with Aang and Azula. One of the best fights in the entire show. And just off of that, I feel like it deserves to be in the fire tier. But then this leads into, like I said in my book 2 video that I keep mentioning, which you should watch because, you know, it's a great video and I think you'll like it. It leads into the Ba Sing Se arc, which is my favorite sequence and arc of the show. And the City of Walls and Secrets is, I'm going to put it in the fire tier. The only reason I put it in fire tier is because I think the episodes that it sets up are series defining. But this episode, again, is just the layup for the craziest alley-oop of all time. And the Tales of Ba Sing Se, I said it before, but I'll say it again here. If it's a filler episode, it's the best filler episode of any show ever. This is one of the most iconic episodes of the show. Just Uncle Iroh's 3 to 5 minute sequence alone is one of the most iconic and memorable moments of the show. But also you have Sokka's poetry battle rap, which is hilarious. Toph and Katara's bonding chapter is really kind of touching, you know, really sweet. And then you have Aang's goofy ass chapter where it's just Aang being Aang, you know, being selfless and goofy and helping some zoo animals. And then you have what I think is maybe not the best one, but like my favorite one, even more so than the Iroh chapter, is the Zuko chapter, because it illuminates so much about Zuko, the type of person Zuko is, the things he's going through, and how he's trying to fight through his own issues for his uncle's sake and for even the sake of himself, right? To better himself rather than fall back into the life he once was in. But yeah, just an amazing episode all around. From there we go to Appa's Lost Days, which who would have thought that an episode about a non-talking pet of the heroes, or something they just use to fly around on, is so emotionally scarring and sad and depressing, and one of the best episodes in the show. I don't think I would put Appa's Lost Days in series defining, but it's definitely around like the top of fire tier. It's a really good episode, and I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they made an episode about Appa so good, but goddamn, they did it. And then Lake Laogai is 100% series defining as well. And this might be one of the most referenced elements of the show. Lake Laogai and like the mind control, mind brainwashing element of it is so crazy. Jet's death, air quotations, Jet's death was super, super wild to see. It felt like, even though there had been deaths before the show, like with Zhao, and I think there have been other characters that might have died. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe just Zhao. That felt like a turning point in the show. Like, I don't think the show had gotten that dark before, where a good guy died, right? Like, Zhao was a villain through and through. Jet was a former villain who, again, someone who was doing too much good to the point where he became bad, but then righted his ship, became a better person, and then still died. Was like wild to see. But yeah, definitely a huge series defining and impactful episode for me personally, but I think just for the series as a whole. And then the Earth King, actually, the Earth King, I think I'd even go as far as to say is just mid. I was gonna say it was solid, but it's a huge step down in terms of like hype and quality from the other episodes of the Ba Sing Se arc. It's kind of got the Avatar Day problem of it's sandwiched between all these amazing episodes, and it's kind of like on any rewatch, it's like, all right, now we got to get through the Earth King episode just to get back to the greatness that is to follow. So yeah, I'm gonna put Earth King in mid. But then the Guru is yet again another series defining episode, and I mentioned this. I didn't just mention this. I glazed the shit out of this episode in my book 2 video. I mentioned before how I love when this show has characters just seemingly solely there to be like these introspective figures who just give speeches about the world and existential connections and spirituality and shit like that. And no one does that better than Guru Patek in this episode. And like I could talk all day about this. Just him and Aang chilling on a temple mountaintop, going back and forth, shooting the shit about life and the world and what our purpose is in it and all that shit, and opening up chakras and eating banana onion soup or whatever they were eating. Yeah, I love this episode. And it also leads perfectly into one of the best finales I've ever seen of a season of television, The Crossroad to Destiny. I mean, has there been a more shocking moment in Avatar than when Azula basically kills Aang from behind with the lightning strike when he's going into the Avatar state? I mean, the entire episode is great, you know, with Zuko and Katara, and you thinking Zuko's finally gonna make that change to be a good guy, and then gotcha. I'm still a piece of shit, right? Like that moment, Iroh talking with Aang about, you know, his purpose and like doubting what he can and can't do and all that stuff. It's a great episode before the ending. The great fights too, but just the way it ends with the heroes losing, like just L's across the board, is just something I never expected to see. Like the only other show I had seen like that at this point in my life was Dragon Ball Z, where it just felt like, oh wow, the heroes just lost. Like that's crazy. But even then, they would lose to come back and win like 5 episodes later. This was the end of the season. This is how everything went. You know, like they lost, and Ba Sing Se fell. The war had technically been won at that point. The last great Earth Kingdom, the last bastion of freedom in the Earth Kingdom had fallen. So yeah, great finale. Definitely belongs in the series defining tier. And then we get into book 3, which I haven't actually talked about much on this channel. You know, I mentioned it briefly in my book 2 video, maybe once or twice in my core video. Book 3 is almost akin to season 1 of Attack on Titan to me, where it's kind of just like this roller coaster ride of like emotion and just crazy moments. But despite that, it kind of starts a little slow with the awakening, which seems to be a trend in Avatar, right? Like they start slow and then gradually build up hype and momentum to where they just knock it out of the park with, you know, the mid-season moments like finales, and then the true like season finales. But yeah, the awakening was cool just because you got to see Aang with hair. Right, he had his little lineup going. He had his fade a little bit. It's a cool episode. It's solid, but I wouldn't say anything more than that. The headband, though, I think is fire. I think the headband is one of those really fun, just kind of goofy side episodes that it doesn't really mean much to the overall context of the show, but again, it's just enjoyable to watch. It's just a nice little contained story. The Painted Lady, though, I think is sort of a worse version of Imprisoned, Imprisoned from book 1, where again it's a Katara focused episode, and you know, it's her being a little too stubborn and going out of her way to help other people. But for some reason this one just didn't hit the same for me. But no, it's still a good episode. Like I said, it's solid, but I just wouldn't put it much higher than that. But then we got Sokka's Master, and I go back and forth on Sokka. There's some times where I really like Sokka, some episodes where I really don't like Sokka, but this is one of his shining moments, I think, in the series. And it was cool to see with him being like the outsider of the group, right? 1, being the oldest, 2, not being a bender, and having that sort of like othering going on with his character and his dynamics with the rest of the crew. It's cool to see him get his master, have, you know, his mentor, get a sword, space rock, like all that cool. But yeah, definitely I would say Sokka's Master is on the fire tier of episodes. And then we have The Beach, which I go back and forth on about whether or not I think this is just a really good like fire episode, or if it's one of the best episodes in the show ever. And I think just in my more, you know, optimistic, open-minded heart, I think I would put it in series defining, because this episode I feel like gets talked about nowadays, like, you know, whatever, 15-20 years after it's airing, more than a lot of other episodes. It's one of the most referenced episodes on the internet, like with memes and stuff like that, and just getting that perspective from the villains. It's something that the show does all the time, like it does at least once or twice per season. But this is one of the best versions of it. So yeah, I think I'll put it like the bottom of series defining. Just seeing, you know, how Azula, Mei, Ty Lee, and Zuko all interact when they're not in battle, when it's not a life or death fight against the heroes and stuff like that. Then there's the Avatar and the Fire Lord, which is one of the best and most important lore episodes. Just going back through Roku's life, which is something that to this point all the fans of the show were definitely interested in seeing and learning more about. I still can't believe my man lost. My man lost to a volcano. He got taken out not by another bender or an army or anything like that, or an assassin. He got taken out by a fucking steam cloud from a volcano. But definitely a fire episode. Not quite series defining, but definitely very important, very interesting, very good episode. With some interesting, messages about the connections between everyone and who was really evil and good and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd put it like near the higher end of fire. And then we have the Runaway, which I think is solid. Like it's one of those episodes where it's not too memorable for me. Like I don't think it's that great of a book 3 episode, but I do really like the moment where Sokka is talking to Toph about Katara, and Katara's listening in. They don't know that she's listening in, and Sokka has that monologue where he's like, yeah, I don't, when I think of my mom, specifically what a mother figure looks like, I don't see my mom, I see Katara, right? Like that's how long that not only their mother had been gone, but how well Katara had taken care of Sokka and the village and things like that. I thought that was one of like the cooler moments of Sokka's character and just the show in general. But yeah, despite that, I think the episode itself is just okay. Like Toph and Katara's back and forth, like their little like almost like sisterly rivalry was kind of funny to watch, but it's just an okay episode overall. But the Puppet Master is 100% a series defining episode. My God, man, has there ever been a power introduced into a show that was doper to see than, like, more dope than bloodbending? Like, bloodbending is some of the dopest shit I think I've ever seen in my life. And the fact that this was supposed to be just like a special Halloween episode, like, and it's gone on to be one of the most impactful episodes and important episodes in the series is crazy. Like the Legend of Korra, almost, at least the book 1 of Legend of Korra, you could argue couldn't exist without this episode introducing this power. That's how much of an impact that it had on the entire show. Like Hamo is just a creepy ass perfect villain. The fact that Katara ends up learning it, and it's like almost like a curse, right? Like, yeah, like now you know it too. Like you're just like me. Like the way it ends with Hama giving her that like final cryptic message. Yeah, it's a great episode. It's not like scary, but it's definitely one of the creepier episodes of the show, up there with like Lake Laogai. And it's got to go in series defining. And then we have Nightmares and Daydreams, which is just another goofy episode. I'm just gonna put it in mid. It's not terrible by any means, but it's the calm before the storm of the Day of Black Sun. And the Day of Black Sun, I can't put in series defining, but I think I would put it at the top of Fire. So many important things happen in this episode. This is where Zuko finally leaves the Fire Nation and makes a pledge to join the Avatar against the Fire Lord, against the Fire Lord's war. And just the whole, again, I love when shows focus on failure, right? Like not just failing, but also the drive to overcome that failure. So to see, like, a lot of shows, this would have been the end, right? They would have, oh yeah, this is what we've been planning since 20 episodes ago in the last season, and we finally are going to bring it to fruition. We got everybody back. We got all the characters that you have come to know and love, and we're all going to fight the bad guys together, and we're going to win. Well, they don't win, and they lose all of those characters that you came to know and love, right? They all get captured, and they have to run away with their legs between their tail. That's not how that goes. And they have to run away with their tails between their legs, right? Like that's the reality of it. It was such a interesting thing to see happen. And yeah, so definitely it's got to be in the fire tier. But again, it's just not quite on the level of like the series defining episodes for me. And then you have the start of what I always called the Big Brother Zuko arc, where with the Western Air Temple, it's also the last of the Air Temple episodes. And this episode, I would say, it's either mid or solid. The reason why is because, it's got the famous, Zuko here line, which is always funny. Just how Zuko being awkward will always be funny. But other than that, it's not really that, like, nothing really happens in this episode. It's kind of just like an in-between episode that's setting up the next arc of the show. So I'm just gonna put it in, it's like probably like the top of mid. It's nothing too special other than a couple of memorable memes that come from it. But then you have the Firebending Masters, which again is like the true start of the Big Brother Zuko arc, where he's just going on these journeys with all the characters, and they're all learning stuff about themselves and their powers and their abilities and stuff like that. And I think this one is, I'll say the Firebending Masters is solid. It's not quite fire, like it's a good episode, but it's not like, I'll say this, the other Big Brother Zuko episodes are much better than this one. But I think it is a cool episode, right? It's interesting to see that, dragons are still alive. They were the original firebenders, blah, blah, blah. There's more to firebending than just anger. And, they all learn that. Well, Aang and Zuko learn that. And, that's what allows Aang to start being taught firebending by Zuko. So it's important, but I would say it's not quite on the level of the Boiling Rock, which I would say the Boiling Rock is, it's so close to being a series defining episode, but I think I'm just going to put it at the top of, it's like right up there with The Day of Black Sun, Boiling Rock Part 1 and 2. There are so many interesting dynamics going on here with Sokka, Suki, his father, Azula, Mai, Ty Lee, Zuko, that one dude who tries to help him escape with his bitch. I forget his name, the real stupid dude. The warden. It's damn near peak Avatar, but it just feels like it's missing something to stop it from being in the series defining tier. But yeah, I'll happily put it at the top of fire tier. Great episode. And then there is the Southern Raiders, which again focuses more on Katara, but not just Katara, but her and Zuko, how she's really the last one to fully accept him as, the firebender of the crew. Which obviously makes sense because of how Zuko screwed them over, and Katara specifically, in the end of book 2 with the Crossroad to Destiny. And also seeing Katara, deal with the loss of her mother, and finding the man who killed her is crazy to see. It's very captivating to see. And then also her realizing that she doesn't want to be like him. She doesn't want to kill. She could kill him. She could have fucked his shit up. But she was like, no, I'm better than you. I'm going to leave you alive and let you suffer in the miserable life that you've made for yourself. And I don't want to end up like you. So really cool message, really cool episode. I'm going to put it in the fire tier. And then we have the last of the goofy, funny episodes, which is the Ember Island Players, which is just also serves as kind of like a recap episode. The Ember Island Players is fire. It's one of the more like, to me, it's like the headband. Like, it's kind of just like a goofy, funny episode, and it also serves as like a recap of the series. Not exactly fully truthful recap, but definitely a funny episode that I always enjoy coming back to. And it's a nice little like break before you get to the ultimate finale of finales, Sozin's Comet Part 1 through 4. And Sozin's Comet, all of the episodes are in the series defining tier. It is damn near a perfect finale and ending to a series. Like, you're not gonna find too many shows that wrap up better than Avatar: The Last Airbender. Seriously, like, this is a direct question to the people watching this, are there any nitpicks or anything that you think the show didn't wrap up well, or should have explained more, or should have gone into more detail about, or shouldn't have touched it all, like maybe a direction it shouldn't have gone into. Because every time I watch this, I'm just like, damn, I don't think I need any more of this. Right? Not that I wouldn't want more, but it's just like it ended everything perfectly in a cinematic, amazing way. Right? Like, I didn't mention this when I talked about the Siege of the North, but the Siege of the North was the first time that the show truly amazed me. Right? Like, I was enjoying the episodes up until that finale, but the first time I was just like jaw on the floor was the Siege of the North, and then the second time jaw on the floor was the Crossroads of Destiny, so the book 2 finale, and then the last time that my jaw was on the floor was, well, the Puppet Master. I think I also put my jaw on the floor, I'm not gonna lie, but the Sozin's Comet finale also jaw on the floor, dude. Like the Azula fight, the downfall of Azula is one of the best arcs ever. It's not an arc in the way you typically think of a character arc. Like usually you think of them like coming around and being a better person, but Azula's was the descent, right? Just her descent into madness was so crazy to watch. And then the final fight with Aang against the Fire Lord, who I think if there's one thing the show could have done more, it's shown more of Fire Lord Sozin. That's not his name. See, I don't even remember his name. Fire Lord Ozai. There you go. They could have shown more of Ozai. He was kind of just like a faceless villain for most of it, and which really led Azula to feel like the main villain of the show for most of the show. But I do think his final fight with Aang is one of the most iconic moments in animation history. And yeah, just across the board, just amazing from start to finish. 2 hours, and none of it was wasted. None of it felt dull or boring or unnecessary. It was all action-packed, memorable, iconic. It's one of the best things I've ever seen. But yeah, I think that's the tier list, and I mean, not surprisingly, there's really not much at the bottom of this list, right? Like, there's only one episode that I put in the worst tier, the straight cabbage tier, and that's the Avatar Day. I think it's easily the worst episode of the show. And then we have a few episodes in mid, and most of them are in mid because they're kind of like breaks in the action, like the Earth King, like the Western Air Temple, like the Avatar State, right? They're just kind of like the Nightmares and Daydreams, like they're episodes that come right before amazing episodes or right after amazing episodes that just aren't up to that quality, right? And then there's, you know, a solid amount in the solid tier, right? Episodes that are good but just not super memorable or great. But then look how many are in the fire tier here, man. This is crazy, right? Like, if we just took the episodes in the fire and series defining, that's like 70%, 60 to 70% of the show is just amazing episode after amazing episode. But yeah, again, not surprised. Avatar is one of the best cartoons ever. But yeah, let me know in the comments how you feel about, you know, my opinions on it. What are your opinions on it? What are some of your favorite episodes? You know, what is there an episode that you think is just straight up bad, like the Avatar Day? Do you like Avatar Day? Do you think I'm tripping? You think that should be in the fire tier, series defining? Which I can't believe anyone would think that, but you know, people have crazy opinions, or different opinions, I should say. But yeah, let me know what you think down below, and yeah, I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.